Okay, welcome back, everyone. Robert Tulip, he comes to us from Australia, so we really do have quite a global set of speakers today, as you can see. He also has an eclectic background, as most of our speakers. He's from the study of philosophy and religion, career and international development, but now he's become quite the dedicated researcher in astrology, religion, science, with a special focus on the precession of the equinoxes as the unifying concept.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say, firstly, what a delight it is, as we used to say in Australia, to come home to the old country. And I'd like to especially thank Robert Curry for his encouragement and support for my articles in Correlation, which I'll be speaking to, and Roy Gillette for his support. Now, this first diagram, I'll just spend some time explaining what it means. The wave function that you see here in each line of this chart, it goes up and down 9 times over 179 years. And what the solar system barycenter is the center of mass for all of the mass of the solar system. And of course, the sun contains 99.8% of the mass of the solar system. All of the planets together, just 0.2%. But when Jupiter and Saturn, the 2 biggest planets, are together, when they're conjunct, the line is high. And what that means is that they are pulling the center of mass out of the sun. So the sun is on the other side of the center of mass. When Jupiter is opposite Saturn, the line is low. And that means that the center of mass of the whole solar system is inside the sun. Now, the reason that there's this 179-year pattern is because there's a remarkable triple conjunction series between Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. So every 179 years, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune are in almost exactly the same place relative to each other as 179 years before, 179 years after. And this is a theme that we will see has a remarkable astrological signature. And the key to this is that if you multiply 179 by 12, then you get the number 2,148. Now, most of us who've studied the precession of the equinox would be used to the knowledge that one astrological age is traditionally 2,160 years, but the actual period of it is 2,148 years. So we see that 12 of these primary solar system patterns, this pattern that integrates all of the mass of the solar system, when it's gone round 12 times, it equals 1 astrological age. And that presents a remarkable resonance between our terrestrial patterns, that is the astrological age, the physics of the astrological age, and the integrative physics of the solar system. So the 2 articles that I've had in Correlation that discuss this, that I encourage you to have a look at, and I've put them up on academia.edu if you'd like to read them there or see them in Correlation. The first in 2022, The Physics of Astrological Ages, and the second last year I called The Braid of Time, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune Cycles as Cultural Paradigms. So just some reflection on these concepts. As above, so below. What happens in the solar system is reflected on the Earth. The dominant patterns of our solar system are reflected in the dominant annual patterns of the Earth. Now, there are 5 braided conjunction families formed by Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune, and I'll go into this in more detail. in each family, there are successive triple conjunctions every 179 years. Now, this is another astrological signature. Each 179 years, those three big outer planets have all advanced by 34 degrees, just over one sign. And what that gives us, as we'll see, is a remarkable pattern. These houses of the age, I call them, they advance by one sign each time. So the hypothesis that I'm exploring is that the periods of dominance of each family group are reflected in the rise and fall of successive cultural visions, which suggests a paradigm shift to a terrestrial cosmology that is looking in astronomical terms, not so much how do we describe the universe, which is the theme of mainstream astronomy, but how do we connect to the universe? And it's this connectivity that emerges in astrology that is such a profound source of wisdom and insight. Now, the first line, the first chart, which with the lines, if each line you roll it up and have a look at it in terms of the distance from the sun to the solar system, to the center of mass, then you get these diagrams, and that's a bit hard to see. But let's go back to 53 AD, the period, the 178.9 years from, and we see that this flower pattern emerges. Now, and this begins with a triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune in Pisces, and that's why I've called it the House of Pisces. Now, if we advance by one house to the next period that begins in 232 AD, we see that all of the lines are almost exactly the same. They've barely shifted. We've got this stable pattern of the solar system that is reflected. So here we have the House of Aries beginning in 232 and continuing through the 12 houses. We see each time, you can look at each individual line, they just shift very slightly, reflecting the, it's like ripples in sand, that when you see that they're not completely parallel, but they just gradually shift over time. And so continuing through 769 AD to 948, the House of Virgo, and the House of Libra from 1127. Of course, this means that there was a triple conjunction of Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune in Libra at the start of this house. And Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, 1843, and our current situation as we move towards the coming Saturn-Neptune conjunction in 2026, which skips over one. It occurs with just one. Now let's see what's happened here. I think I've got the wrong PowerPoint, but that's all right. There were some extra slides that I was going to show. So let's bring all this together. And this is I've called it a quintuple helix structure of the solar system. And what we see here is that at the bottom of the chart, this is the 12 conjunctions that I showed you that extend through the age of Pisces. And in 53 AD, Jupiter was one sign away, that is 30 degrees away from the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Then 232, Jupiter was closer. Through to in 789, there was a triple conjunction over just 5 days. And so it was an extremely tight triple conjunction. So my hypothesis emerging from this diagram is that when these triple conjunctions are very tight, then that creates a signature for that historical period. And so we can look at the various periods. If we go back into the BC period, let's call it the classical period. The triple conjunctions were successively in Leo, Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio, and then becoming Luke. So what it means is that if we go up to the top of the chart, these events are when Jupiter is opposite the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and at the bottom of the chart, Jupiter is conjunct the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So you get this pattern that emerges. So when the classical period gave way to, let's call it the Christian period, this point of crossover was in 49 BC. Now, does anybody know something that happened in 49 BC? Yeah. I heard a yes.
Saint Jean-Baptiste.
It was when Caesar crossed the Rubicon.
What?
Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. And so I find it quite an interesting thing that the date that is traditionally viewed as the turning point from republic to empire in Roman history is also the date when this family of Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune conjunctions, the classical family in its dominance, gave way to the Christian family. And so as it continues, the Christian family became stronger and stronger. And so it's a cumulative, successive structure of history that each time builds upon the previous one. And so as the classical paradigm was growing weaker, the Christian paradigm was growing stronger. And then with its tightest point, 769, really, in a sense, the heart of Christendom, when the early Christian faith had a dominance. And I apologize, I'm taking quite a Eurocentric perspective on this, as that's what I'm familiar with. And then this, what color is that? That's like a reddy orange, isn't it? Or brown or something. This crossing point around the year 1307 and marks a time when the Catholic framework of the medieval era and was giving way to the emerging modern culture, the modern paradigm. And so we see if we think of the modernism as characterized by the Protestant Reformation, the rise of capitalism, the scientific revolution, we have this series of triple conjunctions over the last centuries. So going back to the Reformation, a very tight triple conjunction in Pisces, 1703 at the height of the scientific enlightenment, a triple Jupiter-Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries. And if you think of this, the sense that this triple conjunction in Aries coloured the success, the house. So the period from 1703 through until 1882 in Taurus. And so let's consider that we are now living in the house of Taurus of the modern age. And we can see the power of the capitalist system as something that has a domination in our world. And so this current family will have its next triple conjunction only in 2061. So I hope most of us will still be alive then, but it reflects how what a slow time period this is. And if we think of this 179-year period, it's in American Native Indian culture, there's a focus on the great-grandparents to the great-grandchildren, like 7 generations. And this is like a period that that encompasses that human time frame. So there are still old people alive today who, when they were born, knew people who were born at the start 180 years ago. So it creates like the boundary of our sense of history. So what's happening with the old Christian paradigm? It's really been steadily weakening. And 1846, the triple conjunction in Aquarius. Now, because it's a 34 degree gap between successive events, it skips one in every 7. And so we see that Saturn and Neptune are now in Pisces and very close to each other at the equinox cusp, but they don't actually come together until 21 February next year in Aries. And so we've got, so there's a skipped house, 1 in 7, in this case it's Pisces. And so we have this very important event for this decade. I think there are several events, astrological events for this decade that are really key, like going back to the Saturn Pluto conjunction and the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius. This is part of the great polarity shift that we're seeing this year. With over the last decade, the great outer planets have all been in signs of negative polarity of water and earth, and they're now all moving into positive polarity, which suggests a really quite transformative paradigm shift. It's this theme of paradigm shift that I find really exciting in this material. Now, so as we, what I'll do is I'll just zoom in a bit on this structure. I've explained this timeline with the classical, Christian, and modern paradigms, and of course the emerging paradigm is the Age of Aquarius. And so in looking at the physics of astrological ages, as the topic of one of my papers, this analysis really helps us to understand what that means, because it's not until 2600 that the emerging Aquarian paradigm crosses over into dominance over the modern paradigm. Now, wouldn't we love it to be earlier? But that's we need to be patient. Time moves slowly, and yet there are so many signatures of the Aquarian age that we're seeing today. The ingress of Pluto into Aquarius, the coming triple conjunction in Gemini in 2061 has a very Aquarian signature. There's the whole polarity shift that we're seeing, as I mentioned, has an Aquarian shift. Now, one thing that I find interesting in looking at this Aquarian family, I call it that it'll be tightest in Aquarius in 1,000 years' time, and it's there was a triple conjunction between 1917 and 1920 in Leo, and I think of this in terms of the Russian Revolution, looking at it as like an early forerunner of a cooperative culture that will take centuries to really emerge and take over, but that has signatures that were rather confused and difficult, and of course the tragic history of Russia illustrates how that level of confusion, I would say.
Robbie, sorry to interrupt. We've got 3 questions all saying, could you explain what the colours for the lines mean?
Each color represents a family. That's
Okay.
yeah. So
Can you give an example?
well, so this light blue color represents the classical family when the triple conjunctions were tightest in the BC period. This darker blue line from 53 AD through to 1300 AD, I'll call the Christian family, and the red one is the modern family, and the green is the Aquarian family.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, just exploring this in a bit more detail, the modern family at the bottom of the screen we've seen has these successive triple conjunctions in Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, and the emerging Aquarian family. Like that's at a 60-degree orb, so you don't really call it a triple conjunction, but it's on the way. And of course, the Christian family is becoming quite weak now, and we're at the tail end of a family that was dominant 1500 years ago. So I just wanted to go into some of the science behind this. If we take this wave pattern that I showed you on the first screen, and there's a method in signal processing called fast Fourier transform, and it takes a physical wave and decomposes it to say what are the components of that wave. And what we see when we decompose the position of the sun against the center of mass is that the dominant factor by far is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction period. So every 20 years, Jupiter and Saturn powerfully move the sun in a wave pattern. Then the next strongest is Jupiter-Neptune over about 13 years, followed by Jupiter-Uranus and Saturn-Neptune. And then there are all of these smaller peaks extending, for example, here to the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, which is, of course, 171 years. And each of these peaks correspond to a planetary pair. And so I just found it very interesting to study this, and that all of them match to a well-known pair of planets, except for two, which I've been corresponding with astronomers to try to work out what these two periods are, and I haven't been able to find out yet. So it's something of a mystery. But this is it's a way of decomposing the data that NASA has generated. So let's just recap. The sun has a 178.86 year wave function in its movement around the solar system barycenter, and this is the integral wave function of all the mass in the solar system. And the repetition of this wave is governed by triple conjunctions of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, which occur in
Neptune. You said Pluto, Neptune.
Oh, sorry, I meant Neptune. Apologies. And these occur in overlapping 179-year cycles and forming a quintuple helix braid of time. And it's a framework that is deeply astrological. We see that the number 12 is embedded in the solar system. It's not just numerology, it's physics, that the resonance between the precession of the equinox, the astrological age period, and the whole movement of the solar system is quite profound. And so through 1 to 12 to 144, the whole great year period, and forming these houses of the age, as I've shown you, with the examples of in the various years. Now, I'll just have a look at this chart for the ingress into the house of Taurus on the 13th of May 1881. And we see, of course, that there were 8 planets, all in Taurus at that time. And similarly, we can look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up on the 20th of February next year. And we see here that the conjunction at Nord Aries is quite a distance from Jupiter, which illustrates how this family group has gradually weakened. I had some more slides, but unfortunately I haven't got the right version on the screen. And then we can look forward to 2060 with the next ingress into the House of Gemini in 2060 as a key event for the age of Aquarius. So, describing the causal unity of the solar system as the home of humanity, understanding the fragile sensitivity of our living planet, exploring how the temporal structure of the solar system governs our cultural and spiritual evolution, seeing an integral planetary structure of history in resonance with the solar system, observing the underlying causal unity of each moment in time, and integrating a scientific worldview with a synchronous spiritual psychology. Thank you.
Give us a second for questions.
Okay, here's one for you, Robbie. You've written a paper called Precession as the Framework of Christian Origins, which extends this material into the origin of Christianity. And perhaps I should mention that people can download this paper from your website. Could you give us a brief theory of the theory that you outlined there?
Certainly, and this is actually something that Nick has challenged me on. So we had quite a good discussion about it in our retreat with Robert on the Isle of Man, and that is the astrology in the Bible. Now, the scholarly consensus is that there was that the astrological ages are a modern concept. That is, that the ancients did not have this concept of, for example, the age of Pisces. And yet, when we read the Gospels, we see the for a starting point, the abundant fish imagery in the Gospels, the sheep imagery, the Lamb of God. That's one starting clue to the idea that there is a knowledge of precession. That is, that there was a secret wisdom in the ancient world which was heavily suppressed under Christendom as a heresy because it conflicted with the literal dogmas of the church. And this suppression of this secret wisdom was so successful that we've got no direct evidence for it. I recently read a book called Book Burning in Early Christianity, and it explained how comprehensively successful the elimination of the memory of many features of the early church were. And so, a further point, the Alpha and Omega as the symbols of Jesus Christ, the Cairo cross as the core symbol of the church has an astounding correlation with the movement of the equinox across the first fish of Pisces, which occurred in 21 AD. Although they were able to calculate this to within roughly decadal accuracy, it's clear that there was much wider knowledge of precession in ancient times than has come down to us. And so, for example, the Yuga of India uses the 2160 framework of the traditional estimate of the astrological age. Now, if we look at the big cosmology of Christianity, it says that the fall of man was the separation from the tree of life in Genesis 3, and the redemption of the world will be with the return to understanding of the tree of life. This is at the very last chapter in the Bible. And the remarkable thing about the tree of life is that it is an astrological symbol. The tree of life is a tree with 12 fruits, one for each month, and it has a river running through the middle of it. Now, has anybody ever seen a tree that has a river going through the middle of it? Well, let me ask you to look up, not on a cloudy day like today, but on a clear night, and perhaps not in London, but somewhere where you can see the Milky Way, and you will see that the Milky Way, the river of life, clear as crystal, as the Bible calls it, runs through the middle of the tree of life. And so what the Bible is telling us is that its original cosmology was deeply natural, and this was corrupted by the supernaturalism of the church. And so as astrologers, we are bringing a profoundly ethical message to the world to say we must reconcile with nature, that our alienation from nature is sending us on a path to hell, a path of collapse, of catastrophic destruction, as we're seeing with climate change. And so that we need a new paradigm that can read the Bible in exploring its underlying message. And so, for example, this story of Jesus Christ as the avatar of both the age of Pisces in his first coming, perhaps imaginary, and as the age of Aquarius. So it's a new way of interpreting Christianity that seeks to reconcile faith and reason, bringing religion and science together through the recognition of astrology. Now, Nick's got his hand up, but you may have other questions.
I have to say,
wait, Nick, if you want to speak, please come up to the front so that the people on Zoom can hear you.
I have to say, the dialogue we had before this conference was because there's a sheep in the Bible and a fish, as well as bulls, goats, and everything. This means nothing about whether that symbolism is based on precession of the equinoxes. So all the evidence suggests that astrological use of precession of the equinoxes only was first mentioned by Isaac Newton and only became popular in the 19th century. And to say, oh, there's no evidence because it was suppressed, there's an absence of evidence because it was suppressed, is just like to ignore the evidence that we have.
Yes, so, I would dispute that, Nick.
I think that what you're saying is like, you see, who is it in response to Freud? People say sometimes a cigar is a cigar.
Yes.
So,
the thing is that there is so much.
Hang on a minute. There's undoubtedly some astrological symbolism in the Bible. There's the Star of Bethlehem, and indeed the tree of life with the 12 fruit, but nothing at all that points to interest in precession of the equinoxes.
I completely disagree, of course, and I think it's a really interesting debate. We don't let's leave it for later, Nick, because there's probably other questions now. But I'd love to pursue this further. I put to you the miracle that occurs most in the Bible is the loaves and fishes. 6 times, 4 times with 5,000 men, twice with 4,000, and the loaves and fishes are Pisces and Virgo. It's the symbol of cosmic abundance. So let's come back to it.
I know, but still not precession.
Well,
Right? It's like, not there. So
If you go to Israel, it is barren land, but there is a lake with fish. And this is abundance, which is litter.
Thank you. Next.
Let's carry on.
We're breaking the rules, but go straight to normal now.
We can do that for Nick. Is that?
Okay, next one. Have you studied Theodore Landscheidt's work on solar angular momentum around the barycenter?
I'm familiar with Landscheidt's work connected to the electric universe. I have his book, and I have not studied it in great details. But there is a series of scholarly work that relates in various ways. It's quite a multidisciplinary topic, and Landscheidt's work is one important element.
Thank you.
What do you make of the fact that the intervals between the triple conjunctions of Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune are not constant?
Well, I make of it that they are in elliptical orbits. and so if they were in circular orbits, then perhaps they might be constant. But the averages are very close. I was recently doing a really interesting study of the Saturn-Neptune synodic period, which is 35.8 years, but it varies by a year or two. And I was trying to get my astronomer friends to explain why does it vary, and they couldn't explain it. So it's astronomy is really a complex field, and I think that this astronomy of the solar system is something that I would just love to have, contestability around all of these things. In my first paper, I estimated the distance as 31 degrees, but that was because I'd used an incorrect method. It's actually 34 degrees. So I just welcome any challenge and correction.
Thank you. Next question from David online. 1307 seems a bit early for the Christian era to give way to the modern era, but it was exactly the year when the Knights Templars were suppressed. Do you attach any significance to that?
Absolutely, yes, that's true, and I mentioned that in my article. And so I think the thing is that these processes, they are gradual, and so like you can say, it's not as though the Protestant Reformation sprang fully formed like Athena from the thigh of Zeus or the forehead of Zeus in 1517 with Luther nailing the theses. There was a whole process of emergence, and the Renaissance equally had its earlier roots with the translation of classical literature.
Thank you.
I mean, I haven't formulated the question, but it's in my head. It's going to come out. No, I think exactly your answer gets me a little bit to the difficulty of studying these things. This is a little bit, touches on what Tom was saying earlier as well in terms of, are we fitting the data to the astrology, or are we fitting the astrology to the data? And here, this is very much an example of, well, we've got these astrological periods, and then what we can say, okay, what happened in 1307? What happened here? And, using that kind of logic, you can always find something that happened in history, right? So, just kind of talking about that, like, how do you choose, how do you identify what the actual, like, how would you prove this to a skeptic?
Well, there's nothing to prove here. This is a purely empirical diagram. Like there is no in this diagram, there is no astrology whatsoever in terms of no speculative interpretation. I've raised speculative interpretations, but the fact that there was a crossover from the Christian family to the modern family, and that it happened in 1307, just as there was a crossover from the classical to the Christian family in 49 BC. But these are empirical facts. And so the issue is, okay, we've got this empirical fact. How can we understand it? What does it mean?
Right. Well, and that's precise. the empirical fact would be completely uninteresting to us if you weren't attributing some sort of significance to it, right? Like, I mean, the interpretation is precisely the argument that you're making, right? So it's,
Well, so the thing is, for the last 700 years, we have had successive triple conjunctions in Pisces, Aries, Taurus, and so they provide. They've been quite tight triple conjunctions. They provide a skeletal framework of our modern period, and we can then, for example, we can look at the great stellium of 1881, I think it was, or 1882, in Taurus, and say, how has that coloured our subsequent history as the ingress of the house of Taurus that we're now living in?
We have one final question. We have time for a short one. Can you explain on this graph what do you mean by wide not exact and then tight exact? That's that question. Or, sir, do you want to clarify?
So, Robert, you said it becomes more exact.
Okay, at the y-axis is the 30-degree units of zodiac signs to Jupiter from the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So each of these dates is a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and the original graph was constructed just as the faint vertical lines that you see, and I've added manually the horizontal lines just connecting every fifth event. And so you see that every fifth event, they're very far from a random scatter. They form very distinct families. And these distinct families, they've been in existence for 4 billion years, since Neptune put the face on the man in the moon with the late heavy bombardment. Our solar system is remarkably stable. This pattern, it's a wave function that recurs every 6,000 years. So it's the distance of Jupiter to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction.
To know how wide was not exact.
Well, wide is opposition.
Opposition, thank you.
So I mentioned, as I mentioned, at the top, 6 signs away, Jupiter is opposite. At the bottom, Jupiter is conjunct.
Thank you. Thank you very much.